And we are here on Observer now with Flagler County Commissioner Andy Dance, who's been around for a while. I mean, you were a former school board member. You were the chair on the Flagler County Commission, and you have been serving this community for quite some time. And we thank you for that. And we thank you for joining us here today.
My pleasure. Good to be on with you today.
And I thought this was really interesting. Recently, you proposed a 12-month moratorium on new data centers in unincorporated Flagler County. Now, what specific concerns prompted you to bring that proposal forward?
Absolutely. It's front and center in front of everybody's news. It's a statewide issue. Governor DeSantis, actually signed into law Senate Bill 484, which provides restrictions on electrical and water consumption for hyperscale data centers. But interestingly enough, in that law, it also called out and ensures that local communities have the ability to set stricter standards or deny projects, and ensures that we have the ability to properly classify and regulate them within our local rules and regulations. So understanding that, I just felt the time was right to bring it forward and be proactive. We need to be in a mindset of proactive planning and not reactive. So in my mind, this is just an example of trying to get a step ahead of the issue and review our standards, the comprehensive plan, our land development code, zoning, and make sure that we are ahead of the game with potential permitting of these things.
So with the comprehensive plan, what gaps specifically do you think might currently exist, or is it just better to check first? You're not sure of anything specific?
Well, this is rapidly evolving technology. Terminology isn't even included in recent versions. So we need to make sure that we properly evaluate the usage of the natural resources and the locations that are suitable and unsuitable. It's just the right time to take a pause and evaluate all that.
It's pretty interesting. We have drought conditions right now. It has been raining last couple of days, but the St. Johns River Water Management District implemented phase 3 water shortage restrictions, residents limited to irrigating their lawn once a week. When you see news like that, is this something that maybe strengthens the argument for a moratorium on data centers?
Yeah, and I think, we need to have accurate information in front of us when we do this analysis. And one of the concerns is the amount of water that some of these large-scale data centers can consume. And there's different types, so we need to evaluate those that use straight water, how it's recycled. But then there's closed loop systems, and closed loop systems have their own problems because, as I understand, and I went through a review process at the Northeast Florida Regional Planning Council a couple weeks ago prior to introducing this to the commission, and Nassau County is going through a similar process, and they led a presentation that talked about all the different things that they have learned about these systems. Even closed loop systems, although they sound nice, they have and utilize hazardous materials in order for the closed loop systems to effectively cool the computer equipment. And then you've got issues of how do you deal with hazardous materials? Where is it stored? How is it removed from the site? There's a ton of different information and particular issues that have to be evaluated and addressed. Water is one of the main ones. So yes, the tie-in with the restrictions is just that water is our most critical resource here in Florida. So yes, we need to be proactive and definitely be concerned about potential water usage.
And as far as data centers are concerned, how about the positive aspect of it? How would that benefit Flagler County if we did eventually have a data center here?
Well, I think that's part of the process, right? I think what I proposed is a public hearing process so that we get input from residents, business leaders alike, and we debate those issues. I think, with the DC blocks and being in the equation, we've heard through that process of potential tie-in to that where we could have other high-tech jobs. I think the concern here is balancing those needs with our protecting our natural resources, protecting quality of life for citizens. And this process allows us to evaluate that ahead of time and not reactively.
You read my mind, because the next thing I was going to ask is, how do you balance economic development opportunities with protecting Flagler County's environmental resources, quality of life, things like that when considering data centers? And
right, this is just that. This is through proactive planning. I hate to be repeating myself, but we have to look at these things ahead of time and not be reactive. So we have to, look at how we prioritize and identify those natural resources that are critical to Flagler County. We have unique ecosystems here, and where can they be located? It's a big question that requires some analysis and debate.
unanimous support from the board on this. What's next in the process?
The next in the process is staff working out a draft ordinance. They are in the middle of that. My hope was to get this to the board on June 15th, but as I understand, we didn't get our notices out in time. So in order to comply with public hearing notices, we will target the one meeting that we do have in July for that public hearing. The first public hearing, then the second public hearing would be in August.
All right. And I wanted to bring this up. I think this happened back in March, but it was a big deal. Florida CFO Blaise Ingoglia went on his press tour and took some shots at Flagler County government, said there was $59 million in wasteful spending here. Do you believe the CFO's analysis accurately reflects how the government budget works in a fast-growing county like Flagler?
Yeah, first and foremost, personally, I pushed hard for our Flagler being one of the first to sign on to the DOGE process. I think it's critical that we're open and transparent with our finances, and wherever we can get efficiencies is what we're looking for. Where I think the CFO's report misses is one, it's a snapshot and takes everybody at the same metrics. So regardless of your unique characteristics and for us, Flagler had, very unique budget constraints and characteristics back in 2018-19 when he started his window. We were not in a good financial situation back then. Reserves were low and our credit rating was poor. And over those years, we were in the mode of building reserves. We had built our credit rating up due to that fact. We're a coastal community. We have a lot of different challenges than other counties. So building up a substantive reserve is critical for us. And we had that discussion during our recent workshop on funding phase 2 or reach 2 of our beach management plan. And cash flow was one of the main things we talked about. The state, right, provides these fundings for us for capital projects. So we have a ton of capital projects that are being funded by the state, but we have to expend the money before we get reimbursed. Just like with this beach renourishment, we have to spend the money and then wait on federal agencies to reimburse us. That's why we need a big reserve fund to be able to cash flow these capital projects without going into debt. And that's been the plan all along, a big reserve and being able to fund these projects and have the cash flow necessary to move it along. I don't know that they fully understand that that's a unique characteristic to Flagler. And I think that's where most of that $59 million was mischaracterized.
So I know he had the press conference, but was there ever any communication with commissioners, one-on-one talk? Did they ever reach out to you guys?
We got a 2-day notice that they were coming, and there was no pre-meeting to talk about or having an opportunity to evaluate, the metrics and the data that they used to reach that determination. We've since then have asked numerous times to get that data back, to have the analysis so we know exactly what they were evaluating when they made their determination. We want to see that report, so we can have a good collaborative session, and that's what Doge was really all about. The Doge process was collaborative. We sent them a ton of information, everything that they requested. We sent them all that financial data. Now this FAFO audit is different. It's not Doge, but we were under the assumption they would all be treated similarly, and we just want the opportunity to be able to look at their data and see how they came up with their numbers so that we can share our data and find out those discrepancies.
Was there ever any response to your request?
No, we've sent a few emails, Freedom of Information Act requests by email, but with no response. We had our attorney send a little more official letter just so we can stay on top of it. We don't want this to go past without a thorough review.
Gotcha. And is there anything officially on a future agenda? Do you expect to address? I'm sure it's addressed during budget season and all of that, but is this something that commissioners will be talking about again on the dais?
Yeah, I think we had a discussion too from a resident standpoint. This still is being used and shared by social media, and we're working on a Q&A and a response. It would help if we had the information back from FAFO so that we could address them, specifically with the data that they have. But we'll make a response using the generalized data that they gave us, and that was in the press conference, the original press conference, so that we can offer that up to the public that this is where we think the discrepancy is.
You brought up beach renourishment, and it was a big part of a workshop earlier this week. And I think some residents are confused. Do we have a funded beach renourishment program? Is it not funded? Where is the money coming from? I think that number is at around $35 million for the Reach 2, which you guys were discussing this week. Just try to give us an overview, explain exactly what's going on right now with beach renourishment.
Sure. We're in the middle of the contracting process for to have the renourishment for Reach 2 completed next year. So we've done the bidding process. There's been a low bidder, a preferred low bidder that we are talking to at this point. And you're right, a little over $35 million. And it's from about 6 different funding sources. So FDEP, state, they all have different grant amounts that they have put into this so that we can finalize this reach, and it is all funded from different various resources. I think I mentioned earlier, the problem is the cash flow, right? We've got to put the money out first and then wait for reimbursement, and that 35 million is a big number. So that was most of the discussion that we had at the workshop. The other issue was with easements. We have to acquire construction easements from the beachside properties. There's 17 that remain that we don't have yet. We got 100% of them for Reach 1. I'm confident we'll get 100% for Reach 2, but it is a time-consuming process. So before construction starts November or early spring, we will have confident we'll have all those in place so that we don't have any gaps in the system.
And a county engineer mentioned that you were at about 30 in January, and now you're down to 17. So that is encouraging, and he was confident that you would get that number down to 0 before construction starts. But say it doesn't go down to zero, does that make this renourishment project less successful, effective?
Any gap in that system is a weak spot. So, we don't want weak spots in that protection system. So, through in front of that one parcel, you would have the beach nourishment up until the erosion control line. There's a graphic that shows where that is down the beach, but we could only go up to that point and not past it, and that creates a protection gap, and we just don't want to have any protection gaps. It does weaken the system in that one spot, so we want to get 100% of the easements.
So and this is going to go until August, right? When you're planning, the board is planning on having a final decision on this by August.
I believe, or August is the absolute latest that we authorize the contractor to book that contractor.
But you're hoping maybe you can have a decision even before then.
I believe so. I believe there was some information, some of that is due back to us. We're going to review some of it in the next workshop on the 15th, and then by July's meeting, I believe we'll be ready to go.
Now, beach renourishment, it seems like it's becoming this recurring expense. Does the county need to permanently budget for it? Are we already doing that? What's the situation there?
It is a complex situation for sure. We have Reach 2 funded. We have agreements and easements in place for a large portion of Reach 3 already.
Reach 3 is further north, right? You're going into the hammock,
yeah.
and
correct. But there's complex issues with Reach 3 in regards to environmental permitting because of the hard bottom that's in those areas. So we're still permitting in that area, and funding is not in place for those future reaches.
There's a collapsed seawall out there or something like that, right?
That's within Reach 2, actually. That's it is a one area that we are waiting to get more information back in front of the campground in Beverly Beach.
Gotcha.
Their seawall collapsed during one of the recent nor'easters last year.
Is this something? Is this an issue that's going to exist for the rest of, Flagler County's future? Are we always going to be trying to figure out how to renourish a beach? A storm comes through, it wipes out the work that was previously done. I hear this a lot. Is this something that we're always going to be paying for? Is there an end in sight to this?
Sure. Great question, and one I think that is front and center. So there's a couple components to beach infrastructure, and the beach is a major piece of infrastructure that requires maintenance for many reasons. I mean, it protects the barrier island, it protects our utilities and access ways, it protects the natural environment that makes the hammock unique. It protects property values and does provide that tourism boost for us. So protecting the beach long-term is a priority. The science behind renourishment is that, it takes a while to build up the shelf that's off the beach. So one renourishment doesn't do it. It takes about 3 renourishments over time to build the shelf back so that we have an ecosystem that fixes itself, and it will take many years to accomplish, and it will take a long-term, unique, dedicated funding source, which is not in place yet.
All right, and the other thing I wanted to bring up from the workshop on Monday, I thought was quite extraordinary. The adult daycare center previously voted to close. I think it was going to close the David Siegel Adult Daycare Center on October 1st. It was scheduled to close, but now, hold on, not so fast. Maybe it's actually going to live on And Anna Rosa Randolph, she runs a couple of facilities, I think in DeLand, and she gave a very passionate presentation on Monday, and it looks like we might actually save the adult daycare center. Uh, is this important? What's your take on this?
Right. So last year, we reviewed the performance of the adult daycare operations. And in reality, it was not, the performance metrics just weren't there. The amount of money that it requires to operate the system, we had a handful of clients that were using it, and it just didn't make fiscal sense to spend that much money on a handful of clients at the time. We closed the door, but left it open for other options to come forward. So since then, right, this proposal has come forward, and it's a public-private partnership, as it's being called, to be able to utilize the Siegel building for adult daycare. I think it's one of the options that we're going to continue. There was support to continue looking at the proposal. I'm a fan of doing it competitively, and not just with the first person that's come forward. I would rather put together an RFP that goes out to the public, so that we have other either profit or not-for-profit companies looking at ways to utilize the daycare center, the Siegel Center, for adult daycare. I don't think there's just one way to operate an adult daycare. There could be different models, and I'm in favor of looking at different models. So we might get different people proposing. Now that this one has been put forth, and maybe somebody else will see it and say, I've got a better plan, and we'll take a look at that.
So at this,
but I am very impressed. I just want to say I'm very impressed with what the one lady, Ms. Randolph, did put forward. And it is a need in the community, whether that is something that our government puts forth, especially considering today. All right, we'll date stamp today's interview by the fact that this House and Senate both passed property tax reform today. So we have to analyze, starting today, the details of that property tax reduction plan that will go on the ballot in November.
Because the facility would still be the county's building, right?
Yes, it's county building, correct.
And Ms. Randolph, Anna Rosa Randolph, she would be running it in your facility. So any repairs, like I heard something about the roof and the parking lot, that would have to be taken care of by the county.
Yeah, just as landlord for any type of use. Yeah, we own and maintain the buildings. We want to make sure that any maintenance or upgrades are done to county standards. So we'll continue to maintain that building.
And you mentioned the service probably needed, by her estimates, 4,000 people around the area with dementia related diseases that could use the help. And a significantly cheaper option to, assisted living facilities and things like that.
Correct. And I think that's the draw, is it's a drop-off facility. So there are minimum stay requirements for the week in her plan. I think it was a minimum of 12 hours must be utilized during the week. And that's why I said there might be, if there's different options, then maybe, there's other ways to do this. But in her plan, somebody would have to commit to 12 hours a week. Gotcha. But it is a cheaper version, right? The concept behind it is for relatives, somebody who has somebody with dementia or is being cared for at home. This type of drop-off facility gives them interaction with other people that they don't get at home, but also gives the caregiver time to go off on their own and take care of issues that need to be done, whether it's shopping or healthcare, other things.
Right, great for mental health, things like that. So what would be the next step here? You mentioned competitive. Will there be other proposals? When is a decision expected for something like this?
I don't think there was a timeline other than we want to get it done quickly, as there's licensing issues. So through the state, these facilities have licenses, and we would need to continue our licensing at a certain date, which wasn't disclosed. I don't know what the drop dead date is, but we want to be able to get something in place so that we can continue the licenses without them having to be reinstated.
And one last thing here, I really appreciate your time today. Is there anything that maybe we're not paying attention to? We have no idea about that the residents, we should be, the media, we should be paying attention to that's happening right now in Flagler County.
Great question. I would say for the public, the county is working hard, one on our natural resource preservation through our ESL program and through funding by former Speaker Renner for Florida Wildlife Corridor purchases. We've been working hard and have been securing significant parcels for preservation and conservation in the county. The most recent one was they call the Big Cypress Natural Preserve over on the west part of the county. It was just under 4,000 acres that was purchased, now be set aside for preservation and conservation, and that's the latest. Also on the agenda from Monday's meeting was what's called the Lastinger property. It's a significant parcel in the Barrier Island that will be preserved through a conservation easement. It's a less expensive model to where you can preserve the natural resources, existing vegetation, unique characteristics of a parcel by a conservation easement as opposed to fee simple purchase, right? We're also working on that parcel in Veranda Bay on Summertown, adjacent to the Below Creek headwaters, right? We were putting in a proposal through Florida Forever to gain funding. Unfortunately, through the recent budget process, a lot of that preservation money went to agricultural preservation and not through Florida Forever. So Florida Forever didn't get much funding, if any at all, which hurts us on that chance. But through ESL, we still have different options to be able to preserve that parcel abutting the Below Creek headwaters. And I would say the second item of consequence for the public that the county's working on is the expansion of the Below Creek Headwaters Regional Park. We've got, over the past year, we've put together a concept plan with funding from DOT, and now have that southern part of 100 between Old Kings Road and John Anderson is the headwaters of the Below Creek Regional Park. We've got a couple thousand acres preserved there that we're building a passive park so that the residents have additional trails and opportunities to enjoy the beautiful nature and characteristics of the county. The trail will also have a trailhead at the base of the new bridge. The pedestrian bridge will have a dedicated trailhead with bathrooms, restrooms, and then the additional expansion of the trail system. So you'll be able to go south from the pedestrian bridge all the way down to the Volusia County line.
Very cool, exciting stuff here in Flagler County. Thank you so much again for your time, Flagler County Commissioner Andy Dance. Thank you for joining us on Observer Now.
Thank you. Been my pleasure. And thank you for the opportunity.